When I discovered BlackRock's true power, I was horrified. This isn't an investment company. This is the financial arm of the world's largest shadow government. I'm Megyn Kelly. In 20 years of working in mainstream media, I've seen many powerful companies, many billionaires, many politicians, but I've never encountered a force like BlackRock. The data I have right now reveals a reality most people can't even imagine. BlackRock isn't just an asset management company. It's the real controller of the global economy. And you're not even aware this company exists until your retirement fund collapses, your home value evaporates, your children's future gets destroyed. That's why I need to tell you this story, because someone has to. During my decade-long career at Fox News, I hosted Wall Street's biggest names in the studio. Goldman Sachs CEOs, JP Morgan executives, hedge fund kings, they all talked about how powerful their companies were, how they moved markets, how they influenced policy. None of them mentioned BlackRock. I remember interviewing Jamie Dimon, CEO of JP Morgan, in 2015. He boasted about JP Morgan's $2.5 trillion in assets. We're the most powerful bank in America, he said with that characteristic Wall Street arrogance. I didn't know it then, but BlackRock was already managing twice that amount. And unlike JP Morgan, BlackRock wasn't just lending money, it was controlling the companies that borrowed it. Because talking about BlackRock meant exposing the real power hierarchy. And in that hierarchy, even Jamie Dimon was just a pawn. When I moved to NBC in 2017, I thought I could do more independent journalism. I pitched stories about concentrated corporate power, about market manipulation, about conflicts of interest in Washington. Every time BlackRock came up in my research, the story got killed. Not enough viewer interest, they said. Too complex for our audience, they said. But I knew the real reason. I pulled the shareholder reports. NBC Universal's parent company, Comcast, had BlackRock as its second largest institutional investor. You don't bite the hand that feeds you. The same silence existed everywhere. No investigative stories about BlackRock, no critical analysis on any major network, no congressional hearings, no regulatory scrutiny. It was as if the most powerful financial institution in the world had somehow made itself invisible. Now that I'm completely independent at MK Media, I can tell you the truth. BlackRock's real dimensions, and these dimensions are far more terrifying than you think. Let me start with the numbers, because numbers don't lie even when everyone else does. BlackRock manages $10.6 trillion, that's trillion with a T. To put that in perspective, the entire GDP of the United States is $25 trillion. BlackRock alone manages money equivalent to 42% of the entire American economy. But that's just the beginning, because BlackRock doesn't just manage money, it controls it. Through its various funds and ETFs, BlackRock is the largest shareholder in Apple, the largest shareholder in Microsoft, the largest shareholder in Amazon, the largest shareholder in Google. It owns 6.1% of Apple, which makes it more powerful than any individual billionaire. It owns 7.2% of Microsoft. It owns 6.8% of Amazon. It owns 8.1% of Alphabet, Google's parent company. You might think, well, that's not a controlling stake, and you'd be technically correct, but you'd also be missing the point entirely. BlackRock doesn't need to own 51% of a company to control it. It just needs to own more than anyone else. And when you combine BlackRock's ownership with Vanguard and State Street, the other two mega asset managers, these three companies together control virtually every major corporation in America. Let me give you a concrete example. In the airline industry, BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street are the three largest shareholders in Delta, United, American Airlines, and Southwest. The same three companies own the four largest airlines in America. Now, why is this a problem? Because airlines are supposed to compete with each other. They're supposed to fight for customers by offering lower prices, better service, more convenient routes. But when the same shareholders own all the airlines, competition disappears. Why would airline executives engage in a price war that would hurt all their shareholders' investments? The result? Airline prices that defy basic economics. Despite massive government bailouts, despite lower fuel costs, despite improved technology, flying has become more expensive, not less. This isn't a free market. This is managed capitalism. And it's not just airlines. BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street are the top three shareholders in the six largest banks in America. The same three own the largest pharmaceutical companies, the largest tech companies, the largest oil companies. We're not looking at a diverse, competitive economy. We're looking at a few dozen executives managing the majority of American corporate assets. But the real power isn't in the ownership percentages. It's in the voting. When you buy shares through BlackRock's ETFs, and millions of Americans do through their 401k plans, you're not just giving BlackRock your money, you're giving BlackRock your vote. Every share of stock comes with voting rights. The right to elect board members, the right to approve major corporate decisions, the right to determine executive compensation. But when you own shares through an ETF, BlackRock votes those shares, not you, BlackRock. So BlackRock is using millions of Americans' retirement savings to vote in corporate elections according to BlackRock's priorities, not your priorities, BlackRock's. And what are BlackRock's priorities? That brings us to Larry Fink, BlackRock's CEO and the most powerful man you've never heard of. Every year, Fink writes a letter to the CEOs of major corporations. This isn't just a friendly note, it's a directive, a set of instructions on how these companies should operate. In his 2023 letter, Fink told companies they needed to demonstrate progress on sustainability or face consequences. He demanded workforce diversity metrics. He insisted on stakeholder capitalism instead of shareholder capitalism. This might sound progressive and enlightened. It's not. It's corporate control masquerading as social responsibility. Because here's what happens when a CEO receives Larry Fink's letter. If they comply, BlackRock continues to support their stock price. If they don't comply, BlackRock starts selling their shares, which drives down the stock price, which makes the CEO look bad, which can cost them their job. It's not a request, it's extortion with a smile, and it works. After Fink's sustainability letter, oil companies started divesting from exploration. After his diversity letter, tech companies started hiring based on demographics instead of qualifications. After his stakeholder letter, companies started prioritizing social issues over profits. You might agree with some of these goals. You might think sustainability is important, diversity is valuable, social responsibility is necessary. But that's not the point. The point is that these decisions aren't being made by democratically elected officials, or by consumer choice, or by free market competition. They're being made by one man who controls $10.6 trillion and faces no democratic accountability whatsoever. Larry Fink is effectively making social policy for America, and he was never elected by anyone. But BlackRock's power extends far beyond corporate boardrooms. It extends into government itself. After the 2008 financial crisis, when the Federal Reserve needed help managing the bank bailout, who did they turn to? BlackRock. When the pandemic hit in 2020 and the government needed to manage massive economic rescue packages, who did they turn to? BlackRock. BlackRock has been the Federal Reserve's primary contractor for financial services for over a decade. They manage government bond portfolios. They advise on monetary policy. They help design financial regulations. Think about the conflict of interest here. BlackRock is simultaneously the largest asset manager in the world and the government's primary financial advisor. They're writing the rules of the game while playing the game. When the Fed decided to buy corporate bonds during the pandemic, BlackRock managed those purchases. BlackRock decided which companies received government support. BlackRock decided how much support they received. And surprise, surprise, many of the companies that received the most government support were companies that BlackRock had large investments in. They used government money, taxpayer money, to bail out their own investments. And they made billions in fees for managing the bailout. It's not just the Federal Reserve. BlackRock has contracts with the European Central Bank, the Bank of England, the Bank of Japan. Central banks around the world are essentially outsourcing monetary policy to BlackRock. And BlackRock's tentacles extend into the highest levels of government. Brian Deese, who served as President Biden's National Economic Council Director, came directly from BlackRock. Michael Pyle, who serves as Vice President Harris's Chief Economic Advisor, came from BlackRock. Adewale Adeyemo, the Deputy Treasury Secretary, came from BlackRock. Tom Donilon, who advised Obama's National Security Council, is now BlackRock's chairman. It's a revolving door. People move from BlackRock to government, where they write policies that benefit BlackRock. Then they move back to BlackRock, where they're rewarded with huge salaries. This isn't capitalism. This isn't democracy. This is oligarchy. But perhaps the most frightening aspect of BlackRock's power is technological. Most people have never heard of Aladdin. It sounds like a Disney movie, but it's actually the most powerful financial software in the world. Aladdin stands for Asset, Liability, and Debt and Derivative Investment Network. It's BlackRock's proprietary trading and risk management system. And it doesn't just manage BlackRock's money, it manages money for thousands of other institutions, banks, insurance companies, pension funds, sovereign wealth funds. Over $21 trillion in assets are managed using Aladdin. That's more than the GDP of the United States. When institutions use Aladdin, they're essentially letting BlackRock make their investment decisions. The algorithm determines what to buy, what to sell, when to buy, when to sell. So BlackRock isn't just controlling its own $10.6 trillion. It's influencing decisions for another $21 trillion through Aladdin. Combined, that's over $30 trillion. Nearly 1/3 of all global financial assets. One company, one algorithm, one set of priorities, controlling 1/3 of the world's money. And here's the truly terrifying part. Almost nobody understands how Aladdin works. It's a black box. Proprietary algorithms making decisions that move global markets. When Aladdin decides to sell a particular stock, thousands of institutions sell simultaneously. The stock price collapses. Companies lose billions in market value. When Aladdin decides to buy, the opposite happens. Prices skyrocket. Wealth is created out of thin air. BlackRock essentially has the power to create and destroy wealth on a global scale with an algorithm, and there's no oversight, no regulation, no transparency. The Securities and Exchange Commission doesn't audit Aladdin. Congress doesn't investigate it. Journalists don't report on it. It's the most powerful force in global finance, and it operates in complete secrecy. Let me tell you how this affects your daily life, because this isn't just about abstract market forces. This is about your paycheck, your retirement, your children's future. Remember when you could afford to buy a house? When home ownership was within reach for middle-class families? Those days are over, and BlackRock is one of the main reasons why. Through various subsidiaries and partnerships, BlackRock has been buying single-family homes across America, not to live in them, to rent them out, or to hold them as investments. They're converting ownership into rental. They're turning the American dream into the American rental. In cities like Phoenix, Las Vegas, Charlotte, BlackRock, and similar institutional investors now own 20% or more of all single-family rental properties. When institutional investors buy homes in bulk, they drive up prices for everyone else. Families that could once afford to buy are forced to rent. And guess who they're renting from? The same institutional investors who price them out of ownership. It's a rigged game. BlackRock wins whether prices go up or down. If prices go up, their investments appreciate. If prices go down, they buy more properties cheaper. The only losers are ordinary American families who just want to own a home. This extends to the rental market, too. When the same companies own large portions of the rental market, they don't compete on price. They coordinate on price. Rent goes up across entire metropolitan areas simultaneously, not because of supply and demand, but because the same algorithms are setting prices for multiple properties. You think you're in a free market when you're apartment hunting. You're not. You're in BlackRock's market, playing by BlackRock's rules, and it's getting worse. BlackRock has announced plans to expand its real estate investments, more single-family homes, more apartment complexes, more student housing. They want to own the places where Americans live. But real estate is just the beginning. BlackRock's influence extends into every aspect of economic life. Energy policy. Through its massive holdings in oil and gas companies, BlackRock influences American energy production. Through its investments in green energy companies, it shapes environmental policy. BlackRock doesn't want oil companies to compete with green energy companies. It wants to own both. So it pushes oil companies to reduce production while promoting subsidies for green energy companies. The result? Higher energy costs for consumers and higher profits for BlackRock. Healthcare policy. BlackRock is the largest shareholder in most major pharmaceutical companies: Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, Merck, Bristol-Myers Squibb. When these companies make decisions about drug pricing, research priorities, or distribution strategies, they're making decisions that affect BlackRock's profits. Do you think it's a coincidence that prescription drug prices keep rising despite public outrage? Do you think it's a coincidence that pharmaceutical companies spend more on stock buybacks than on research and development? BlackRock's profit model depends on higher drug prices and higher stock prices. Patients' health is secondary. Technology policy. BlackRock owns significant stakes in Apple, Microsoft, Google, Meta, Amazon. These are the companies that control information flow in America. When these companies make decisions about content moderation, data privacy, or platform access, they're making decisions that align with BlackRock's interests. BlackRock doesn't want these companies to compete with each other too aggressively. Competition hurts profits. So instead of innovating to beat their rivals, tech companies focus on acquiring potential competitors or dividing up market segments. The result? Less innovation, higher prices, and more concentrated power. Food policy. BlackRock has major investments in agricultural companies, food processors, and grocery chains. From the farm to your table, BlackRock profits at every step. When food companies make decisions about pricing, nutrition, or agricultural practices, they're making decisions that affect BlackRock's bottom line. Do you think it's a coincidence that processed food has gotten cheaper while fresh produce has gotten more expensive? Do you think it's a coincidence that agricultural subsidies favor large industrial farms over small family farms? BlackRock's business model depends on consolidated, industrialized food production. Your health is a secondary consideration. Financial services. BlackRock doesn't just compete with banks. It partners with them. The largest banks use BlackRock's services. BlackRock manages their investment portfolios. When banks make decisions about lending standards, interest rates, or fee structures, they're making decisions that affect their relationship with BlackRock. Do you think it's a coincidence that banking fees keep rising despite technological improvements that should reduce costs? Do you think it's a coincidence that small community banks are struggling while mega banks get bigger? BlackRock benefits from consolidated banking. More fees, more assets under management, more control. This is the reality of the American economy in 2025. It's not a free market. It's not competitive capitalism. It's managed oligarchy with BlackRock as the primary manager. And most Americans have no idea this is happening because BlackRock has mastered the art of invisible power. They don't make dramatic announcements. They don't seek publicity. They operate through networks of relationships, quiet conversations, and behind-the-scenes influence. When Larry Fink wants something to happen, he doesn't hold a press conference. He makes a phone call. When BlackRock wants to change a policy, they don't lobby Congress directly. They hire former government officials who lobby their former colleagues. When BlackRock wants to shape public opinion, they don't buy advertisements. They fund think tanks and academic research that reaches the conclusions BlackRock wants. It's soft power, invisible power, but it's still power, and it's growing every day. Every time someone invests in an index fund, BlackRock's power grows. Every time a pension fund chooses passive investing over active management, BlackRock's influence increases. The movement toward passive investing, which seems like a smart financial strategy for individual investors, is actually a transfer of power from individuals to mega asset managers. When you buy individual stocks, you make your own voting decisions. You decide which companies to support and which to punish. When you buy index funds, you delegate those decisions to BlackRock. You give them your vote and your voice. And BlackRock uses that aggregated power to shape the economy according to their preferences, not yours. So what can you do about it? First, understand that this isn't just an abstract policy debate. This is about your economic freedom, your ability to build wealth, your children's opportunities. BlackRock's power isn't inevitable. It's not natural. It's the result of specific policy choices and market structures that can be changed. But change requires awareness, and awareness requires spreading information. Most Americans still don't know what BlackRock is or how much power it has. They think the economy is controlled by market forces and democratic institutions. They don't realize that a small group of asset managers is making the most important economic decisions in America. So talk to people, share this information, make BlackRock's power visible. Because invisible power is the most dangerous kind of power. Second, take control of your own investments. If you have a 401k or IRA, look at what you're invested in. If you own BlackRock ETFs, consider alternatives. This might mean accepting lower returns in the short term. Active management typically costs more than passive management. Individual stock picking requires more research than index fund investing. But the cost of BlackRock's control is higher than the cost of active management. When one company controls the entire market, eventually everyone pays the price. Third, support businesses that aren't controlled by mega asset managers, local banks instead of national banks, small businesses instead of large corporations, independent media instead of corporate media. This isn't about returning to some romantic past. This is about supporting genuine competition and distributed power. Fourth, demand political action. Antitrust enforcement against mega asset managers, limits on institutional ownership of single-family homes, separation between asset management and government advisory services. This won't be easy. BlackRock has tremendous political influence. But political influence isn't the same thing as democratic legitimacy. If enough voters understand what's at stake, politicians will respond. Fifth, invest in assets that BlackRock can't control, real estate and local markets. Sixth, develop skills and relationships that don't depend on BlackRock-controlled institutions. Learn practical skills, build local networks, create multiple income streams. The more self-sufficient you become, the less vulnerable you are to BlackRock's economic manipulation. I know this sounds overwhelming. The scope of BlackRock's power is vast, and the solutions seem insufficient. But remember, this power wasn't built overnight, and it can't be dismantled overnight. Every major change in American history has started with a small group of informed citizens who decided they weren't going to accept the status quo. The abolitionists who fought slavery, the suffragettes who fought for women's voting rights, the civil rights activists who fought segregation. They didn't have more power than their opponents, but they had something more important. They had the truth. And once enough people learned the truth, the systems of oppression couldn't survive. BlackRock's power depends on invisibility and ignorance. Once that invisibility disappears, once people understand how the system really works, change becomes possible. You have more power than you think because you have something BlackRock doesn't have: democratic legitimacy. BlackRock controls money, but in a democracy, votes ultimately matter more than money. The question is whether Americans will learn the truth before it's too late. I believe they will, because Americans don't like being told what to do, especially by unelected oligarchs operating in secret. Once the full scope of BlackRock's power becomes clear, there will be a reckoning. The only question is whether you'll be part of that reckoning or whether you'll continue to be a victim of BlackRock's invisible empire. I'm Megyn Kelly. I've spent my career trying to inform Americans about the forces that shape their lives. BlackRock is the most important force most Americans have never heard of, but that's about to change because the truth has a way of getting out no matter how powerful the force is trying to suppress it. And BlackRock's truth is this: they control more of the American economy than any institution in history. They use that control to advance their own interests, and they do it all with money that belongs to you. It's time to take that power back. The choice is yours.